Hello, lovely, lovely Rich. You and I are meeting for the first time, but we've had a fair bit of email contact in the past, toing and froing to do with the Investor Accelerator trading group that we're involved in. We were both writing a little bit for the newsletter at the time. Rich, welcome to Bitcoin People.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's so lovely to have you here. It's lovely to finally put a face to the name. You're one of our daily Bitcoiners rather than a few bigger names that I've had on recently. And the way I'd love to just start here is to get a sense of what Bitcoin means to you, and therefore why you're even attracted to thinking about it or talking about it, let alone talking about it on a podcast like this.
Yeah.
Why do you care, Rich?
Yeah. Well, I got into Bitcoin, just to make it a quick history of it. I got into Bitcoin 2016 through a friend that was mining tokens and stuff like that. And then he introduced me to the idea. But at the time, I bought my first Bitcoin. So yeah, in 2016, I still have it. And but that I was more it was more of a gamble of like, oh yeah, it looks like an interesting technology. Let's splash some money in and see what happens. But it's only been recently that I looked more into it, so the last couple of years, and I got more involved into like, okay, so what's that white paper about Bitcoin? Why is it gaining in popularity, and why is it making the headlines, and mostly for the wrong reasons? Or when there's a, when it goes up, they don't talk about it, but when it crashes, oh my God, they all like lining up and talking about it. And so yeah, I like the idea of everything being digital and everything being peer-to-peer and skipping the middleman, basically. I really like the blockchain technology around it, make it, you have to trust you don't have to trust a bank, you don't have to trust a middleman. The code is there, is immutable. There's going to be 21 million of them. So I like this narrative of the Bitcoin.
So it's very predictable, but you really like, by the sound of it, also this peer-to-peer thing and the trustlessness factor of it, not having to trust a third party. Why is that attractive to you?
Well, I mean, I was born in 1978, so all like my generation, we have been taught to trust a lot. That trust the bank, trust the professional. They will do all the best thing for you, but as you grow older, and then you start doing your own research and realizing that actually it's better to look at what they do and not what they say. And like, oh, maybe I should get more in control of what's happening. So the peer-to-peer, like skipping that middleman, skipping the banks, and maybe it's the rebellious in me, but I'm not like, I don't have a tinfoil hat and going around and saying that everything's a conspiracy. I'm not saying that, but there's some comfort into knowing that holding Bitcoin, and you know that you know where it is, you're the only one who can access it. There's no bank who can just say, oh no, well, it would take 3 days for you to withdraw because we decided so for such and such policies. Or they look into what you do with your money and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a good appeal. I think it's a good evolution. Like it's a step in the right direction. The more I learn about the fiat system and the banks, the more I'm inclined to like Bitcoin and to understand the technology and the idea behind it.
Okay, let's drill down into that. Let's unpack that. First of all, I want you just to stand up and show everyone your t-shirt, because not everyone will know that t-shirt, because you just said evolution. There it is. There it is. The evolution of man and the evolution of money. Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. Go into for me about, in watching their actions rather than listening to what they say, and you've said, oh, they can't take your money and they can't freeze it and so on and so forth when you're in Bitcoin, and you're seeing this as the next step in evolution. So that didn't used to be an issue. I'm older than you, I suspect, by some bit. Oh, maybe not. We may be.
I know it's 1978. I don't know.
Oh, you were born in 70. Oh, you're a baby. You're a baby. You're right. In the 70s, we did trust. And there was actually not an obvious reason not to. I mean, if you did do a bit of research, all the signs were there already. They were already printing. They were already gathering debt and not repaying it. There was manipulation. There was, I mean, you had the OPEC thing, didn't you? And that was literally a conspiracy, if you want to call it that, or collaboration at least. So
that's a good point. Sorry to
yes,
jump in, but that's a good point about manipulation, because they say, oh, the Bitcoin market, the crypto market's manipulated. What? Show me a market that isn't. Like, so even gold is manipulated like crazy. And the more you dig into that, the more you realize that it's all about power grabbing and being on top by all these big institutions and these big names. So Bitcoin, for me, it gives the power back to the everyday, like the normal you and I people.
Yeah,
that's also a narrative that I really like. It's like giving them the finger.
it really is. It really is. So, what are some of the things that have struck you over the years that, as you've talked about, I don't trust them the way that I did, that, you know, back in the day, we were all brought up to trust them. And now you and I are talking here at our respective ages, having experienced a bit of life, going, don't trust it so much anymore. What is it? Can I get some actual examples of things that have made you question them over time?
I don't have a lot of like personal drama that happened that made me, oh my God, like they screwed me over or anything like that. It's just I inform about what happens in other countries that are struggling with inflation, and they're struggling with the banking system, and how they in some African countries and South America, they can't even open a bank account if they don't respect some requirements. And that's how, like, why? This is discrimination. And so that's pretty shocking though. So I'm fortunate from Canada, now living in Australia, so like wealthy countries and everything is fine. But still, transferring my money the traditional way from my Canadian bank account to Australia can take a week. Cost me a bloody fortune. Why? So, and now seeing that we have the Bitcoin and we have the blockchain, which can take this to the next level.
So there's an element of just pure efficiency about it, the seamlessness of it, the lack of friction, the lack of intervention.
Evolution.
It's evolution. It's evolution. All right. Do you think there's a part of you that we've just been through you're here in Melbourne with me these days. This video won't go up for a week or two, but we've just been through an election here in Melbourne. Clearly, a huge chunk of the population still trusts the government, still trusts their banks, still trusts, I'm going to say, the justice, the health and medicine, in a way that my trust has broken down on all of those fronts, and I think it has done for many of us. There's still a big, so we're a minority, a biggish minority, but still a minority as per the election results. What makes you part of that minority? Why are you a little less, leaving aside the obvious efficiencies and the cost reduction and the frictionlessness, if I can say that?
Which are good points.
Yeah. And they're important points. I think if we go on a pure efficiency point of view, there's no reason why we have to get into deep values and freedom and all of those things. On pure efficiency, we should be going down the blockchain further. But if we were, just out of interest, to explore what is it in you that appears to make you different from your neighbours, that voted basically for trust and governance rather than self-reliance and responsibility.
I think the way I would phrase it is that I pay more attention. Like I spend more time looking at what's actually happening, and I think people are so stuck into their 9 to 5 and into their daily routine that they don't actually have time to sit down and think about it, and they just delegate the thinking to others that they call themselves experts, and they read the headlines and they go, okay, well, they seem to know what they're talking about, so I'll probably trust them, because I don't have time to sit down, go through the papers, make my own decision. So yeah, I think that's maybe one of the main issues, and people who do find the time to look it in and look under the hood and see what's happening, well, most often than not, I think they become part of the minority.
Indeed. And I read something fantastic the other day that was incredibly hopeful in a Melbourne Bitcoiners chat group that I'm involved in. And it said you only need actually 10% of people with a really strong commitment to a belief for that idea to then take off in a more substantial way. And with something like what have we got? Is it 1.7 million no. Bitcoin wallet addresses across the world. I've had two different numbers in my mind.
More than that, I think. But
I think it's way more than that.
Yeah, I think
it's
so
way
too.
more.
I haven't looked the numbers recently, but I think it's the number of wallet with. I think the 1.7
no,
is
it's
it?
about 170 million. 170 million. That's what
Maybe.
it is. Yeah. I knew there was a 1 and a 7 in there somewhere. 170 million. So it's picking up. That's not 10% of the world's population. That's about 1.5 to 2%. But it is picking up. So there is an increase in interest and understanding. I want to get a bit philosophical about this. So Sam Harris says there's no self-will, that you are born with a certain number of genes and then with your environment, and then all of those help to form your thinking, and then that leads to your first decisions that you're making for yourself, which lead you to an idea of this works, that doesn't, which leads you to the next action and the next decision. And then that all becomes kind of confirmation bias reaffirming.
Mhm.
And, and then you've got your genes still ticking over and all your immediate influences. And now more decisions are leading to more different influences on your life that are leading to the next decision. So you've decided to go quite deeply to look under the hood, as you just put it. Other people don't.
Yeah, I think maybe it's just time, effort. So yeah, a bit of
But
laziness.
you're drawn to it. You're drawn to it. You could be spending that time watching TV or going skateboarding or playing music or hanging out with friends, but you're curious about this, about the world. What do you think makes you curious?
I think I even became a passion. Like it started with curiosity, and now I'm like really into it. And I feel like I've done the equivalent of maybe an MBA in the last 2 years. Like just really.
I reckon that's true, though, isn't it? And they say you need a minimum 100 hours before you even start to wrap your head around it and get it. Yeah.
Yeah, and democratization of knowledge is a real thing. Like today you can do a lot of research and a lot of studies that are very good quality online for very cheap or free.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm digressing here, but I think that's a great thing about the internet and a great thing about knowledge sharing. It just empowers everyone, and I think it's marvelous, and it helps Bitcoin in that way because anyone can click and go read the white paper You can make your own idea on arguments that are being out there on Twitter or Discord or all these platforms, social media, and jump in, be part of the discussion, and stress test your thesis. And I think that's amazing. And what you're referring, I'm back to the philosophy about you're the product of your environment, and what made me go against it and going the other way. Maybe that's the way I'm programmed, because I don't want to do a lot of Freud thing here, but I always done the opposite of what my parents were doing. Hi, Dad. But I mean, for example, the heavy smokers, I never smoked a cigarette. The buy lottery, I never bought lottery. Heavy coffee drinkers, I never drank coffee. So you see that I've always had this innate sense of doing the opposite.
Yeah.
And even another example, when I studied, I did a degree in translation. So
Oh yeah.
and after we graduated, me and my schoolmates, like, were okay, so what are we doing now? So they were all going into offices and work, having an employer, and work for a few years under someone to gain experience, and then maybe go the freelance way, and having more freedom and yada. And I said, you know what? I'll do the opposite. I started off freelance. I said, what's the worst that can happen is it doesn't pan out, and then I end up in an office. But guess what? 14 years after, never set foot in an office. It worked.
Great.
So maybe that's just part of my nature. I don't fancy myself as like the big rebel and always against it, but oftentimes it makes sense to do so.
Yeah.
You don't need to be loud about it, and you don't need to, you just do it.
Yeah. I got it. So there are two different tracks I want to go down. I want to hear a little bit about your upbringing and your life in Canada and what brought you to Australia. And I want to hear about this freelancing and what kind of work you do. And then I want to go down what you called the MBA, Bitcoin, and what you studied and where those ideas took you and what really grabbed you about them. Yeah?
Okay.
So let's do the upbringing first and the history and what brought you to Australia. So I want to hear a little bit on the upbringing, the coming to Australia, and the work. Let's do that first. Then we're going to the MBA. Yeah?
Okay. Well, I won't try to put anyone to sleep here, so it will be short and sweet. I grew up in a small town near Montreal, an hour away from Montreal. So, when Foss was talking about being an English Canadian living in Montreal, I was like, oh yeah. I was French. Yeah. My mother tongue is French, but I totally get it. So I did that. Then when another thing, when all my friends after high school were going to college, it's called Cégep in Quebec, but it's like a college really. Mm-hmm. My parents could not afford to send me there, so I had to work. So I worked in a factory for a year, piling up the money and hanging out with my friends that were going to college and thinking, oh, I'm gonna join in later on. But after you work for a whole year to pile all that money, that hard-earned money, and then you go, I don't really know what I want to do. I was 17, 18. It's like, I don't really know what to do. So what I've done instead, I just bought a one-way ticket to Paris and a backpack. So I said, ciao guys, see you later. And 5 years passed, just backpacking around, finding work left and right, going back to Canada.
Sorry,
for work.
My cat's just come to join us and say hello.
Minou.
Sorry, go on. Yep.
Yeah, no, but that's it. So again, instead of going with the crowd and do the college and like follow the path, I decided to go in a different route. And one of the best decisions of my life, really, because backpacking around the world and I worked in Egypt, I worked in Scotland, I worked in Australia. I had a working holiday here in Australia. And the person I'm married to, we met back then 20 years ago.
Oh, that's divine. Oh, that's just that's a lovely story. Okay, what kind of work were you doing along the way that allowed you to work in Paris and Egypt and Scotland?
Oh, hotel and restaurants, the easy,
Oh, okay.
young and easy to pick up. And it's a double winning because as a backpacker, you don't want to go out on the weekends because it costs you. So
Yeah.
instead you work. So you're getting paid for not spending money. Double win.
Fantastic. Tell me a bit about what you liked and didn't like about those different places that you lived.
Oh, I was young and exploring different culture and different languages and different everything. I loved every bit of it.
Oh, did you all of
Oh
it?
yeah, oh yeah.
So give me your one top thing that you loved about each country. Favorite thing about Scotland? I'm going to work my way north to south.
Scotland, favorite thing, haggis. Love it.
Haggis? No, nobody
I
likes
love it.
haggis, do they? I'm
I,
shocked. I'm shocked.
I love it. I
You're the
absolutely
first
love it.
person I've ever met. All right. Favorite thing about Paris?
Is it going to be about food again? It's more the country itself, and it's so diversified, and just backpacking around. Hitchhiking is very good. Oh, it was back in the day anyway. That was before cell phone and email. Well, emails I started there, but no one had cell phone and stuff like that, right? So hitchhiking was actually not so uncommon, I don't think, and it was very good. Some countries were not so good, but France was one of the good ones. French people
Okay.
are pretty relaxed and cool about that.
Great way
So
to meet people. Good for you.
one of my best
Egypt.
friend I met hitchhiking.
Oh, kidding. Really?
Yeah,
Fantastic.
he's flying over next year in May. He's
Oh,
coming to yeah.
beautiful. But that's when the Bitcoin conference is over in Miami. You'll have
Oh,
to, yeah, what are you going
oh,
to do? Now you've got a choice.
oh.
Okay, Egypt. What was your favorite thing about Egypt?
The history, the pyramids, the temples. Um, I have a very special attachment to Egypt because it's the first time when I was going back to my dormitory, I said I'm going back home, and home was not Canada anymore in my head. So it's like this is where I cut the cord. And oh
Oh,
yeah, I went 5 times to Egypt. I love Egypt. It's just
wow.
Egyptians are pretty nervous people. They're very intense
Yep.
people, but they're also great for life lessons, especially bargaining in markets.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
If you learn how to bargain like an Egyptian, you're set. You can go anywhere in the world. You'll have the best prices all the time.
Shame you can't do that when you're placing a trade, right? Okay. Yeah, well, it sort of comes into play. So you came to Australia. You talked about freelancing. I'm assuming that's different from just working in hotels and waiting
Oh
tables and
yeah,
hospitality. So what kind of freelance work were,
uh,
were you doing?
translation. I was
Oh, I
translation
see.
freelance translator, and now not to confuse translation and interpreters. So it's not like a
Oh,
voice, like someone speaks and then you speak back in the other language. That's a totally different skill set.
right.
Translation for me, for what I do, is you send me a document, Word or Excel, and then I send it back in the other language.
Oh, I see. And do you do that for businesses or for, yeah?
Yeah,
And
I got.
that's a big business. You can make a living out of that.
Yeah, it doesn't pay that good,
Yep.
but if you're willing to put in the hours, which I used to anyway, except like for the last couple of years, I kind of transitioned more into crypto trading and other stuff. But I still do translation. I still have like 2 clients that I keep, and no, yeah, no, you can make a very the appeal for it was to be able to travel all around the world, and as long as you have internet access, you got work.
It's portable, isn't it? I know. I've actually thought about this with my son and what kind of work he might move into eventually. And not that I want to overly influence him, except to the degree that I think a portable skill set is really important.
Oh yeah.
Just so that you've got that self-sovereignty to move wherever you need to move and you can work with clients all over the world. Let's go down the track then of what you called this MBA and this kind of digging into Bitcoin and where that took you and what you learned about the fiat system along the way and what you learned about Bitcoin.
Oh, I can go into like broad lines, but all the learning that I've been doing, because I'm still doing it, it is mostly online, and it's all joining the TIA group, for example, is great for to learn about the markets and how they evolved and how they react and how they behave. So that's very interesting. I'm into other Discord groups where people share ideas and observations, and then it's just a lot of reading. And and knowing that, just like the fiat system, the dollar was pegged on gold and it got depegged. Well, they just gave up the whole gold backing.
The whole pretense of anything to do with any kind of standard.
Yeah, and now so what is relying on? It's just faith and hope.
Yep.
Which is
trust left over from the 70s, from pre-70s.
And now there's talks about going back to the gold system, which I don't think it will ever happen, because again, it all comes down to trust, doesn't it? Because if a country decides to do so, what guarantee do you have that the other countries will do the same? Because again, they may say they will, but will they do it? You have to look at what they do, not what they say. So that's an interesting evolution of the whole system, and it's fairly new as well. Like going out printing money like crazy like that, it's not that old. It's an experiment. It's a big experiment, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
what do you see as being the current consequences and potential future consequences of the money printing that they've done?
Oh, well, the inflation and I think one of the main issue is that if you keep printing and then it's all looking at the other one who's printing the less or who's printing the most. Oh, well, this big country, the US, has been printing, so maybe I can't print a bit too. And it becomes a very unhealthy race, if I can say. And it will create a lot of unbalance in values, because that's one thing. And coming back to traveling, I always wondered, like I didn't go back like 20 years ago. I wasn't deep into finance and stuff like that, but I always just wonder, it's like, why is it that my US dollar that, I don't know, normally would have gave me a can of Coke, and now here in Egypt or in other countries give me a 5-course meal? Like, why is it that the time that you put into work to earn that dollar is more valuable in this country than that country? The people here were just the same, and they should deserve just the same. So when I was thinking of all of that, it's because of the exchange and the money supply and all of that, I'm like, there's something fishy about all of that. There's something that makes little sense, and it's unfair.
It's unfair. So there may be people watching this, maybe your friends or family, my friends or family, like random strangers who don't really understand how money printing and trust, again, affects exchange rates, and why these are two separate things. There's exchange rates, but then if I'm Egyptian and I'm earning in Egyptian dollars, I don't know what the currency is.
Pound.
Sorry?
It's a pound, Egyptian pound.
Egyptian pound. So let's just go with exchange rates first, and how you see the disparity and the unfairness between the US dollar and, say, let's go with developing country currencies. Can you explain that to someone who's not really, they've heard the words exchange rate, and they know that when they go overseas, they get more or less of the other currency for their dollar, US dollar, Australian dollar, wherever they are. But they don't necessarily understand why the foreign exchange is fluctuating day to day and over time. Are you explaining that a little bit? This episode of Bitcoin People proudly brought to you by Looking Glass Education, bringing you easy to read, beginner-friendly financial education to help you take control of your financial future. And it's all free, so go check it out.
Whoa, that's a big one. how could I explain this in a nutshell? I don't even know if I understand it completely. I'm still working on it. It's all about supply and demand, and it's all about some countries rely more on imports than export. So if you make your currency cheaper, then you'll be able to export more, and that's good for you. But then you have to find a balance, because if you go too low, then the value of, well, the whole value of your assets will decrease as well. So you need to find that balance. And then depending on the country, that the UK is very dependent on imports, so they have to keep it strong. So they have to limit their printing. So they have to have a stronger presence on the world market. So yeah, this is it's a balancing act. And that's why there's unfairness, because some countries got more weight and more they have more to say on the world markets. Like we got the G8, we got you were talking about the OPEC, and who contributes to that. And I mean, someone from the Cameroon government will come up and say something, and then the US government will come up and say so. Everyone will listen to the US first. I mean, so because of the weight behind it and the economy behind it. So that plays a role. And because there's the greed of systems, it makes it very appealing to crush other currencies to increase your own as well. And that's why you get these discrepancies. And you're thinking, well, as long as they are happy, and because in the local currency, they can get a loaf of bread for that amount, as long as they don't go outside, and as long as they don't look the other way, it's fine, until they start looking the other way, then they realize it's not. So
okay,
I don't know if that answers properly.
It does. It answers it well. I mean, probably the piece we left out of that in terms of how we manage our currencies to do that and how we manipulate is through interest rates, but money printing is part of that too. Yeah. So let's go to, I'm a Westerner. I don't care about any of that. Why should I care? I'm in a strong country and my currency is strong. Why should I care about this money printing thing? I'm hearing you. I'm hearing the peerlessness, the peer-to-peer, and the seamlessness of a Bitcoin transaction.
The technology side of it.
The technology side of it, great. But I'm not convinced. You said that money printing leads to inflation. But hey, inflation's only been 2% for years and years and years, and it's just spiked recently because of supply side, war, Ukraine, blah, blah. But otherwise, it's just not a big deal. Why is this a problem that I should be thinking about as an additional reason to consider Bitcoin?
Well, I think the short answer will be wealth, because you want to preserve your wealth. And if you preserve it, you need to preserve into something, into assets. And if you preserve it in, well, cash was king this year because everything went down so much more than cash. So that's a counter argument, actually, but that's a short-term vision. If we look at it down the road, and if everything increase, all the prices increase, and then you earn less money, then you need more. You may end up in a pickle, and maybe having something. We talked about gold. Gold is not a bad idea per se. It's a bit boring, and if you like, traders and people will find it like, oh my God, like Bitcoin does in a week what gold does in 5 years. So, but let's not go there. The main idea is that, how can I say this? You want to store into something that is valuable and will remain valuable. So in the high demand, and if you put in the dollar, and the dollar keeps being printing out, and then prices increase, like I don't know, maybe in 10 years, a Big Mac will be $20, but your salary won't catch up the same. There's always this, inflation goes up, salaries are catching up, but the ratios always, it's not in your favor, it's the opposite.
Yeah. So even if your salary is going up like this,
If
prices
inflation
like this, yeah.
and
That's right, particularly because it also compounds then, you know.
exactly, and you can see
Year on
still
year.
that I'm not that old, but previous generation had more wealth than today, and then if we keep down this line, well, it's I would say higher, lower highs and lower lows.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So it's just normal to look for an alternative.
That's right. So I want to talk about the alternatives in a moment, but I think the piece that's worth adding on here is that we think of that as not being a problem. So what if McDonald's is $20 in however many years? Why is that a problem? And the problem really about that reduction in purchasing power is that you're saving and you can never get ahead and you can never go on top of it fast enough. And the goal, I thought this was a really good point that someone made along the way. The cost of retirement is always moving away from you. You can never retire. Because those goalposts are because the cost of living is always increasing faster and you can never afford whatever you've got in savings. It's never going to be able to cover what you've the daily living expenses, particularly as they're going up when you stop earning an income. Oh, well, the government will cover me. Well, the government is not going to be able to afford to cover you.
No.
And that's going to hell in a handbasket. You look like you've got an opinion on that. Explain why did you react to that?
No, I just totally agree, because if
Yeah.
like as much as people can laugh at me for betting on Bitcoin, if those people bet on the government to bail them out when they retire, I'm laughing back. Basically, that's what it is. Like, seriously, at least with Bitcoin, I know the risks. I know where it's, well, I think I know where it's going, and if I'm wrong, I can deal with it. I'm an adult, and but there's potential. I would not bet on the government to send me a check every month. Just if it happens and there is a check, it's a bonus, fine. But I will never plan on it.
We've seen pension schemes going down, or superannuation schemes, they're known as different things in different parts of the world, in Japan and more recently in England. People will say, well, the government did bail them out. I am supported. The government is backing me. My investments are backed by government, and that's rock solid. And we've seen them bail out the big banks in the 2008 collapse, property market collapse, etc. It looks to me, as someone new to these ideas, as if government is solid and will. And why can't they just print money, as they did in 2008, to bail not only the banks, but the population, supposedly, out of that hole? What's wrong with government backing us up? Why would you genuinely think that the government isn't reliable and that money printing as a tool of the government isn't reliable? It seems to have worked so far.
Yeah, I don't have a crystal ball of what will happen, but it's playing with fire. I really see it as playing with fire, like you said in 2008 when they bailed out was it GM and Ford, like in the Detroit, the car crisis, saying they just throwing some money, and it's like putting a bit of sticky tape to fix something instead of repairing, and the system itself may not sustain that. It may not be sustainable for that. Since the DPEG with gold, like to go back to what we were saying, and this is all one big experiment, and mathematically it's going to zero. If you listen to that Greg Foss and Booth and others, that they explain better than I would, because I would just be repeating their own words, really.
Yeah.
About why mathematically the show cannot go on forever.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, so let's talk about alternatives. I go, I'm not entirely sure that what you're saying is true, but so I'm just playing devil's advocate.
I never orange pilled anyone, so I haven't worked on it.
Hey,
this is kind of like me
so
trying to orange pill
this
you.
is your indoctrination into orange pilling the world and all the questions you get. These are standard questions you get. These are
You
standard.
got experience in this, I think.
So explain. I go, oh well, I'll invest in shares. I'll invest in property. Property is bricks and mortar. Surely that's as solid as that's rock, which is very Australian. Why would I trust? I mean, Bitcoin's volatile, and right now it's well down, and it has been for this last 6, 8, 10 months, whatever it is, since the November highs last year. So we're coming around to 12 months. Why wouldn't I trust property or shares?
Well, I like property. I'll say it right up. I think well, property, like the brick and mortar on like the house, devaluate, but the land, I think land will always be in demand. That's good. I think it would be a safe bet. Shares, I mean, depends on your time frame. But doesn't mean that it's not because you like property that you need to dislike Bitcoin. Why not both? It doesn't. You don't need to go all in into one asset. It's a bit reckless. You can diversify a bit, and get one investment property and have some Bitcoin, and so it goes. Because, like I'm saying, no one has a crystal ball, and no one knows exactly what's going to happen. But at one point, like if one scenario, I don't know how likely it can be, but at one point when the dollars and the government currencies will keep going down, at one point, what will you measure the value of something? And if it comes down to Bitcoin, that would be great.
I think and this is what I like about FOSS, and there's a well-known expression just in the Bitcoin world, which is get off zero. And the way FOSS says it is just have 1 or 2% of your portfolio in this space, because, FOSS would say this is the asymmetric bet of a lifetime. I've heard a few people saying that. Lynn Alden would say it's not absolutely guaranteed, but it's a better bet than anything that's out there. And she doesn't have all of her investments in Bitcoin. She's got a spread, but she's got a percentage in Bitcoin in her managed funds. So, no, sorry, not managed funds, in her recommended portfolios. So I think this is the thing that I think is worthwhile people taking on board, is that nobody's guaranteeing it. What we are guaranteeing is that the dollar over time in purchasing power, any of our dollars and any of our currencies, is heading to zero. Because the more they print to cover up all the mess, to pay their debts, they're just printing to pay their debts now.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
The insanity of it, the circular thinking around, the madness of, I create debt with a bond that I put out for people to buy, right? But now I've got to pay the interest on that. So I go to my central bank to print some more money so I can pay them. But what that's doing is reducing my purchasing power to be able to pay that back. So now we're doing this. As a government, my purchasing power is going down while my debts are increasing. And
prices are going up and people need more money. So now you have to print even more money for that. And this is kind of the vicious circle going on.
And I think what's become absolutely clear to me with this election is there is no government in the world that gives a toss about its people. It is literally, for all the words that are used by any major party anywhere in the world. You talked before about the kind of the power grab. What's your kind of and I don't want to overly, spend too much time in the political arena, but what's your take on that?
I think some of them can jump in with the right intentions. Is this is corrupt, this is wrong. I'm going to go out there and fix it, and then they jump into that machine, and it just transforms them. Or human nature. It's hard to go against human nature. That's they go there, they say the right thing, but then they get approached by the lobbyist or the whatever, and then suddenly they said they would do it, but they're doing something else, but then no one reports about it. So again, watch what they do, not what they say. And it's sad to see. I don't have any names or examples per se, but in general, I've like in the politic world, I see some people who had genuine intentions and they end up being just like the rest of them.
And I
So
think there's a couple of things that go on there. I think with the best intentions in the world, even if we give the benefit of doubt of the best intentions in the world, they form relationships with people and they want to do the right thing by those immediate people. And that might be a lobbyist or that might be whatever. And so now you're underway with kind of whichever slippery slope you're on.
yeah,
But I also think, and this is what Booth would say about this, Jeff Booth, is that you're trying to fix the system from within the system, and the corruption of money through money printing, through debasement from and the splitting away from the gold standard means that you are affected. There's nothing you can do. There's all the problems are based in money. Money is corrupt. The system, therefore, based on corrupt money, is corrupt not just because human beings are intrinsically corrupt, but because they're working within a system that is corrupt, not because of our bad intentions or because we're even necessarily just power hungry, but just because it's based on corrupt money. The money is broken.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So to come back to the question of the person says, okay, well, let's just say I kind of believe in what you just said, but the money's working just fine. Why would I invest in Bitcoin? Why should I have some Bitcoin? But why not?
It's an
like,
insurance policy against a broken system.
Why exactly?
Yeah.
Just you would sleep better at night with some Bitcoin than without. Anyway, that's my take.
I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that wholeheartedly. Rich, I could keep digging and I could keep exploring, and I know there's other areas where you've got expertise, but because it's to do with trading and it's to do with DeFi, I don't want to go there because I don't want to muddy the waters with anybody, because I do want people to fully understand that Bitcoin and everything else is everything else, and none of them do what Bitcoin does, and none of them are what Bitcoin is. Rich, is there anything that you would like to add in that you feel like we haven't covered, that we were hoping we might go there?
I think we cover pretty much everything. Like, we are in a bear market. Bear market creates Bitcoin maximalists. A lot of people realize that Bitcoin is not crypto.
Yep.
Not the mainstream media, not yet anyway. Hopefully one day they get to this idea. And but like everything works in cycles, so that all the Bitcoin, all the people in crypto, a lot of them become Bitcoin maximalists. And then as the market will go up, the greed will come back. Maybe they'll swap some for crypto
into
and start trading.
Crypto. Yeah.
Try to make money, get burned, come back to the basics. So Bitcoin is like the fundamental.
It's the fundamental, it's the king. It is radically different. It's the only proof of work out there. I think there's actually one or two others, but there's all the others are proof of stake. And to get your head around the difference between proof of work and proof of stake, I reckon is huge in terms of what you've just said.
That could be an entire podcast here.
Yeah, I mean, you've said you've hung on to your Bitcoin since 2016. Yeah. How many other cryptos still even exist from 2016? Which ones even are still businesses and are still around? And that's the difference, because Bitcoin isn't a business. It doesn't rely on anyone or anything. And that's why it's still around since 2016 and none of the others are.
And that's why I understand why countries like El Salvador, instead of being under the influence of the US dollar and be at the mercy of it.
Yes.
They say, well, you know what? I might as well go with Bitcoin. See what happens.
Let's be independent of it.
Yeah. So it's not my currency, but it's not yours either. It's neutral. It's like
That's right. And it's like, and that works at the at the national level, with them wanting to be independent from, sovereign from the US, non-reliant, trustless. I don't have to trust the US and their movements and our relationship. I don't have to trust, just as we don't have to trust our banks when we're using Bitcoin. Exactly. And the money printing system. We don't have to be reliant on any of that.
Because the media, they cover a lot about how El Salvador is under now with this Bitcoin because he bought during the bull market, and now he's under and he's losing money and blah, blah, blah. But what we don't know is like by using, before they were so dependent on the US dollar. So what was happening behind the scenes with that dependency, that the US companies could come in and make requests, and they were kind of like, well, we can't say no. Now they can.
Indeed. And so the next market will come, and a whole lot of people will get wrapped on cryptos, exactly as you said, and Bitcoin will keep going, and it'll move up and it'll come down, but then it'll keep moving up. And that's the other maths that's guaranteed. So the same way as Foss and Booth would talk about purchasing power of the US dollar, my cat's just knocked something over. The purchasing power of dollars or any currency is going to zero. So the purchasing power of Bitcoin will do, as one's going down, the other one's going up,
limited supply and adoption. Which is funny because when someone says to me, oh yeah, but Bitcoin, what's this? It's a big Ponzi, right? Big Ponzi scheme, pyramid scheme. And I'm like, well, tell me the difference between a Ponzi and adoption.
Yep.
If you adopt it, like we decided that gold has value, 50% of it is just stored in cold storage. It's just down in the basement somewhere, not even.
We don't even know if it is.
Yeah. Actually, good point there. So,
and this is, I think, why the Bitcoin community have come to talk about fiat as a Ponzi scheme, the Fiat Ponzi.
Yeah,
it's only because we've got trust and faith that in money, in that piece of paper that I give you, the moment that stops, the trust is broken. Yeah. The whole thing comes crashing down.
We're so early, so I understand why people don't get it. We are so early. So the transition between will be, there's already businesses that do accept Bitcoin now, but they also accept fiat, of course. No one can just go, okay, only accept crypto and nothing else. But no, that won't work. We're not there yet. But yeah, what is the difference between Ponzi and adoption? If people agree, it's all about people agreeing on giving a value to something.
Yes, indeed. And this is something that's really tangible because it's a protocol, it's a program, if you like, that's so that it's transparent. You can read it, you can look it up for yourself. You can get into the system and you can see what's actually going on there, block after block. You can see the consistency of it and the fact that it cannot be tampered with. It gets rid of, all those kind of, what's the double spend problem? You can see that there's a 21 million maximum. It's there. It's all there to be seen in a way that you can't see the opaqueness of the banking and financial systems and the governments, and the interaction between the banks and the governments is so opaque and complicated. There's something much simpler about, I'm not a programmer, but at the end of the day, Bitcoin's simpler than the current financial system.
Oh, absolutely. And what was I about to say? It's nice because what gives value to Bitcoin is that the people decides to give it value, and it's the population. It's not the government coming to you and say, so this piece of paper you have to give it value because I say so. It's the people who spoke. And that's what fiat
means. That's what fiat means, is by decree. That's what the word fiat means. Is by decree. You have to use this. It's compulsory. We are telling you what you're allowed to use as a medium of exchange. It's just a form of control in its own right. Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've just solved the problems of the world, Rich. Don't you think?
Yeah, pretty much.
Satoshi Nakamoto and the original cypherpunks did, and we're just expanding and spreading the word. So, Rich, what a delight to finally meet you.
Let's go for coffee.
Sorry?
Let's go for coffee.
Let's go for coffee. We're going for coffee. We worked out the distance between us, and we're about 40 minutes away from each other. So we're meeting at the 20-minute mark, somewhere between the two of us.
Perfect.
I'm really looking forward to that. Rich, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
All right. You take care. All the best for now. See you.
Cheers.
Bye. This episode of Bitcoin People brought to you by F2F Communications, helping you with your pitches, your presentations, your conferences, and your day in and day out business communications.